Okay, I guess we'll get started. Thanks everyone for being here. Tonight we're just gonna have our Rector Elections Information Session. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Calder. I'm the Chief Electoral Officer. And then also joining us tonight is our freshly resigned rector, Owen Crawford Lem, and a previous rector, Cam Young. So huge thank you to them for coming tonight. And then I'm just going to go through the slide deck. And then if you have questions, you're going to be able to ask myself and them at the end. Okay. Perfect. And then this is going to be recorded and it will be posted along with the slides in case you miss anything or have a question and want to go back later. So no worries there either. Okay. Yep, there we go. Okay. So quick agenda, kind of like I mentioned, I'm just going to give out all the contact information that you're going to need. And then we'll go over the elections process from like a logistics point of view, which is kind of on my end. And then we'll look at some important dates for you. And then a little bit of preparation for nomination campaigning, some rules on that front and things to keep in mind. And then we'll move on to the Q&A. So who's the CEO? Me, I introduced myself. I also work under Alicia Ahmad, who is the secretariat. And then I'm essentially responsible for all facets of the election. So preparing the ballot, looking at candidates, clarifications on any policy questions, any disputes or complaints, and then I'll be administering the debate and basically monitoring the voting. And so if you need anything at all throughout the elections process, you can reach out to me as well as Alicia or Katie. This is our contact information here. That is my cell phone number. I put it up there because I know that sometimes things are urgent, but you're honestly welcome to use it, but please don't bother me for little small things. Shoot me an email. I'm usually pretty quick to respond. Same with Leisha. And Katie is our SGPS contact who's involved in this process. She's also excellent, but SGPS is kind of taking a step back and letting the AMS more so direct this process. So definitely feel free to include her, but I would say if you need anything, I'm kind of your first stop, and then you can also reach out to Alicia. Basically the purpose of tonight, meet with all of your important people, ask questions, gain an understanding, and basically solidify your interest in running and figure out how to do that before the nomination period, which is in a couple short days. So hopefully everyone's already pretty sure about what's going on. Okay, so nomination period between January 14th and January 18th. Essentially what you need to do is you need to collect signatures from 1% of AMS and SGPS fee paying members. There's about 20,000 AMS members. So that's where you're getting the 201 number. And then the other 80 are SGPS from the 80 or the 8,000 people there. You should aim for more. In case that there's a problem with anyone, it would be better to have more than less, but 281 is that benchmark. Anyone that gets less than that, you unfortunately will not be ratified at assembly, won't have met the criteria. Something really important about nomination is it's not an opportunity to campaign. When you're asking for signatures, you can't share anything about your platform. You can't really try and encourage people to vote for you. It's purely just like you've got a form and you're collecting name, student email, student number. Very straightforward. The next step is January 23rd. That's our AMS assembly where candidates who were successful in collecting their signatures are validated. Pretty easy process. You come in, your question will be on the agenda, and then AMS voting members vote yes or no. I've yet to see anyone get voted against, so almost a guarantee that you'll be ratified if you reach this step. Okay, this is where things get a little more complicated and involved. The campaign period is from January 29th to February 5th. You absolutely cannot begin any form of campaigning before this time. That's very important. If someone notices that you are campaigning, they're completely able to send in a dispute form, and then there's going to be sanctions, and it's just a whole thing. So please do not begin any campaigning before January 29th. But essentially, this is an opportunity to publicize and promote your campaign and engage with students. The AMS does encourage that you seek out creative ways to interact with the student body. So there are also a few rules that I'll get into, but essentially candidates are given $400 to spend on initiatives to help out with advertising their campaign and promoting their platform. Reimbursement forms are going to be due at 5 p.m. on the last day of voting, which is February 7th. Please save all your receipts for this, by the way. It makes it really, it's really difficult for us to reimburse you and for the controller to reimburse you if we don't have the receipts and all of the itemized items showing how the money was spent. One important thing about these funds is they are not to be used for giveaways, raffles, or any other prizes which might be used to incentivize voting. Another thing, all materials have to be approved by the elections team. If it's a physical poster or image, anything like that, you have to bring it in and I will stamp it for you. Otherwise, Instagram posts, websites, anything like that, if you shoot me an email, I'll have a look and then approve it straight away. Almost everything will be approved. I'm essentially just looking to make sure it's appropriate for the student body and it fits kind of within the confines of something respectful, polite, positive, and it won't be offensive to anyone or cause issues. Endorsements and mass emails are another important area here. Please note that you are not permitted to have any AMS Assembly voting members, AMS execs, or FACSOC execs endorse you. However, club endorsements are allowed. And then organizations are allowed to send out mass emails to their subscriber list, essentially. But students, AMS members cannot use any mass email lists to send out any endorsements, things like that. Okay, next big event, Rector Candidate Debate on January 30th. This is essentially another opportunity to introduce yourself and your platform. Platforms are released 24 hours before the debate. And it's going to, when I say blended format, I mean, it is going to be in person, but it will also be recorded, live streamed. And so students that are watching from home will have the same opportunity as students present to ask questions. And yeah, it should be fun, especially if we get a lot of candidates out there. We'll have all of you guys up on stage. I think we're planning to use Convocation Hall again this year, or like we did for the exec debate last year, mind you. But yeah, it should be a really good time to share your opinion on certain topics and really allow the students to get to know you and what you stand for as an individual and how your platform will affect life on campus. And then obviously the big one here, voting days, February 6th and 7th. Your question will be on the same ballot as winter referendum. So it will be a separate question on the ballot that also has the AMS executives and all of the student activity fee questions. And then results are going to be released the night of February 7th. You'll rather get a phone call or a visit from us, which is kind of fun, I think. And then, okay, disputes. I'm really hoping this is not something that we have to deal with this year. I'm hoping everyone follows the policy that they're outlined and that everyone is respectful. But if you see a violation or you have a complaint, you're more than welcome to submit the dispute form or the complaint form, which can be found in, I believe, in the nomination package. And make sure that your complaint includes the candidate or team involved in the violation, and as well as the policy that you believe they're in violation of. Then I basically review it. If I think it's frivolous, I let you know that nothing further will happen. If I think that it's not frivolous and that it's a legitimate dispute or complaint, we move forward, and then myself, Alicia, and other relevant bodies kind of determine what sanctions we think are appropriate. These can either be warnings, financial penalties, social media limits, or for more serious offenses, obviously disqualification would be kind of like one of the worst possible outcomes. Does anyone have any questions? I know I flew through that and I talk quickly sometimes, so feel free to say anything.
I had a quick question, Calder.
Oh, hey, Nikki, what's up?
I'll turn my video on for this. I'm just in the education library. I noticed on the candidates package that, and I'm guessing it might have just been like copied and pasted from the AMS, but it only asks about paying AMS fees. Am I correct in that you can have paid your SGPS fees instead?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I will reach out to Alicia right now and let her know there's an error.
Yeah, it was just the form with like your general information.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
Hi, I just have a quick question. Those who are eligible to run have to be a part of AMS. So does that have to be AMS executives, or like what does that exactly mean?
Anyone that is an AMS fee paying member or SGPS fee paying member is eligible to run. So I'm assuming like if you're a student on campus in your undergrad or doing your master's, you probably paid your student fee.
Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Okay, I see.
Okay, if there's no other questions for me at this time. We can also circle back later, but I think I will hand it over to Owen and Cam. Would you guys like me to throw up a slide for you, or do you just want to have your little faces?
Ooh, that's a scary question. You can do, yes, you do whatever you'd like. Well, hello, thank you. My name's Owen, as you mentioned, joined here with Cam. Very nice to be together. So first of all, thanks for everyone who came. It's a really unique position that I think is really important to Queen's and to students at Queen's. There is no other position like this in Canada, and to the best of my knowledge, actually in the world. Student rectors, it's really non-existent and a pretty cool piece of history. You know, it was created in I think 1913 from one of our sister schools, and it used to be, you know, a prominent Canadian figure that was elected by students to represent students, but it wasn't a student. So in 1969, students were like, hey, why don't we have someone who's actually a student representing us at, you know, the highest bodies of Queen's administration and beyond? So lo and behold, 1969, the students decided to kick out, I believe, who was a Canadian senator who was the rector at the time, and elected a student, and it's been students ever since. So it's a really unique opportunity to, you know, sit at the board table, for example, at Queen's, which I don't know if you're following too much about kind of what's going on campus right now. These are some really important and critical conversations to not only students right now, but to, you know, our prospective and future students that might be here, you know, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years from now. So that's kind of the little spiel about, you know, why it's an important position and why I think you should run. I'll tell you a little bit maybe about why I decided to run, and then maybe I'll toss over to Cam, and then we can kind of maybe talk about our experiences in the position, and then I'd love to open it up for questions. So why did I run? I think, you know, there's a few different reasons. I will be the first to admit I didn't know who or what the rector was in first year, even though I think they gave a speech to me in orientation week. So if this was the first time you're hearing about the position, I don't hold any hard feelings against you. But I was always looking for something a little bit more. So, you know, I was looking to be involved with ASIS or the AMS. And the election was coming up, and someone said, hey, have you ever heard about the rector and seen the work that they do? And I started poking around a little bit more, talking to people like Cam, people at the university who have seen, you know, many rectors come through, because it is a bit of a unique term length. It's technically 3 years, although I'm just only serving 2, Cam only served 2, and I think the last rector to serve the full 3 years was actually in 2010, and doesn't happen that often. So I started poking around a little bit more, having consultations, and I just got excited about it. We were just coming out of COVID. I could tell that there was a real want and need from students to get back to like the life that we know at Queen's, but also that, you know, we had a year or two of real reflection about, you know, what we actually want our university to do for us, what purpose the university actually serves in, you know, the greater Canadian and world context, and why do we go to university? What's the experience that we look for? And those were the questions that I started asking students. And from there, you know, I built a platform, I built a campaign team around me who all, you know, had been involved in student elections and before. I had never been, whether it was, you know, involved in a campaign team or whatnot. So I knew I needed to find people who had done something like this before that could help me, because this, as I'm sure Cam will speak to, you don't have the same big, large team around you as, you know, the AMS executive might or the SGPS might. It's really only you. So I knew that from the beginning, and I knew I wanted to create a group of people around me that were able to help me and advise me both throughout the campaign and then, you know, once I actually get into the position, that they would be able to help me kind of formulate, you know, what's worked before, what hasn't. So that was an exciting process, the campaigning part. I really loved that week of campaigning where you're actually going out and talking to students and basically convincing them why you are the best person for the job. It's a bit of a weird experience. You have to kind of get over yourself, to be honest, or at least like my personality is it's a weird thing to do if you've never done before, which I think probably most of us haven't. So it was a long week and an even longer night that the election ballots were counted, but you know, it all worked out for the best. But I think at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, you know, why are you doing this? And make sure that you're asking other people around you as well, like, what are the most important things to them? And making sure that those are also the important things to you, because you are representing students. And while, yes, you are a student yourself, you have to make sure that you are not only representing your own opinion. It's very important to bring your own opinion to the table, but making sure that it's an informed opinion, and that starts before you even start campaigning. So I think that's maybe what I'll say about that. Kim, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about, you know, why you did it and how the campaign period.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good way of framing it. And, you know, it's interesting to hear Owen even speak about the fact that for him, stepping into the rectorship around the time that COVID was beginning to wrap up, and I think many of the, you know, campuses were beginning to come back, and students were beginning to come back from, I guess, their isolation at home, which, you know, I don't know about all of you, but although COVID was a wonderful opportunity for me to know every single aspect of my apartment, I don't think I ever want to go back to being locked in ever again like that. But no, you know, I think for myself, running for the position of rector was one of those ones, similar to Owen, was I really wanted to be able to identify ways in which I could make a positive impact on my community. You know, one of the things that I really treasured and that I learned while I was at Queen's was one simple and salient thing, which was for us as students and as student leaders, what we have the opportunity of doing at Queen's is something that unique compared to every other institution. We have the opportunity to influence what happens for the next generation of students, because we as students have the opportunity to step into these leadership positions. We have the opportunity to step up and help build people along with us. But then ultimately, at the end of the day, much like what Owen is doing and what I did at the end of our tenure, is that we step out and we allow those who are coming after us to be able to lead the next generation of students. But all this to say is that I think the key piece is trying to identify why you want to run and what you want to do while you're in the position. For me, it was really one simple thing. I actually didn't want to run at all to begin with. I remember a friend came, you know, up to me in the cafeteria. I was a Dawn at the time. And she was really kind enough to say, you know, have you heard, you know, the former rector, Mike Young, have you heard that he's going to be stepping out of the position of rector? To me, I said, didn't really think much of it, didn't hear anything of it, but she put it out there and said, well, have you ever thought about doing it? You know, we're going into our last year. I think your time here at Queen's isn't over yet, and I think you have the opportunity to really make a positive difference. Didn't really think much of it, but it was during that week and after that conversation that a number of things ended up happening in the residence. You know, I was at West Campus. And what really, I think, put me on this path of rectorship was, one, there was a student who had an emergency with their mental health. They attempted suicide. And we had to call, you know, emergency services to be able to get them to the hospital. And two, a student came into my room and confided in me their experience that they had of around sexual violence. And much of this was embroiled around the time of, you know, students on campuses across Canada really advocating for mental health, And also, the beginning of the Me Too movement was just starting. And we didn't really see a whole lot of that at Queen's. And that was something that for myself, I asked myself, what are we doing to be able to create a better campus? What are we doing to be able to ensure that at the end of the day, every single student feels not only safe on campus, but feels included here? And what are we doing? As much as we say that Queen's is a home for every single Queen's student, how are we creating that home? And how do we ensure that we continue to build that home for the next students? So that was what I ran on, which was really focused around ensuring that we have the services for students, for their mental health, whether or not they could be able to access it in a timely fashion or even know where to access it. And within the same vein, what are we doing to ensure that we are creating a student body that understands that when it comes to, sexual violence on campus, how do we create that safe campus for everyone? But then within the same vein, the drinking culture. I think it's one that we haven't really talked about a whole lot, and especially during my days, what are we doing to make sure that at the end of the day, those who don't drink, those who do drink, are still able to coexist happily, but that it isn't leading to negative impacts on an education, or it isn't resulting in a night that someone would end up regretting for forever. So those are things that I came to really try and focus on during my rectorship. There were a number of other pieces too, focusing on Indigenous issues, focusing on diversity and inclusion that popped up in my first few months as rector. But all of that was to, again, focus on building a better student body. Now, don't get me wrong, it isn't all trying to just fight and create a new advocacy or really trying to, at the end of the day, set a legacy for ourselves. I think the other piece to it too is celebrating students. The rector has the opportunity through the Agnes Benedictson Tricolor Awards to recognize what students bring to the table, because again, it goes back to the entire piece that Queen's is unique. It's different from every other institution, and the amount of empowerment that we give to students is exceptional. And we should be able to celebrate that at every single step of the way. So how do we fundamentally recognize the contributions that students give throughout their work, whether it's through organizations, whether it's creating new, initiatives? What are we doing to be able to help them? So a lot of that is something that I might also encourage you to think about if you are planning on running, or if you're still in the process of deciding. So I think all of that kind of ties into why we ran. But I think Owen puts it perfectly, which is the campaign itself is an exceptional time to be able to also figure out what you want to be able to do. And it isn't just I would say, piece that you need to have all of the solutions or all of the answers. Listen to the students, listen to what they want, listen to what they need, and be able to build that in. And then fundamentally find ways in which you can continue to empower others around you. Because whether or not you win, or if you don't win, you can still use this as a momentum to be able to identify how you want to shape the Queen's campus that you want at the end of the day.
And maybe I'll add on one thing, because there was one thing that I wanted to make clear about this position that I think possibly isn't sometimes is, and I mentioned this before, like you don't have access to the same type of infrastructure as the AMS or the SGPS. And all of the things that Cam talked about, the Indigenous issues, sexual violence, whatever it may be, collaboration and partnerships are absolutely key and critical to your success if you want to move conversation forward on any issue. But I will also say that with the caveat that it's very change is difficult and requires a significant amount of buy-in, especially when you're operating in an organization that is as large as Queen's University. Mm-hmm. I did not realize how large of a place Queen's was until I became rector and started actually understanding, the full amount of staff and faculty and, support staff and administrators and everything that goes in to making queens queens. So what I think is important to keep in mind, if you're thinking about running or creating a campaign, is that you need to come in with, I think, a strong vision of what you would like to see queens be. And that kind of guides, I guess what I'm trying to say is you're in a lot of conversations that are very high level. You know, at the board table, at Senate, with senior administrators, that you can help guide the direction and strategy of the university. And it's not necessarily, you know, we need to, you know, create this program here, or, you know, allocate, you know, something over here. It's like, well, what is the purpose? What is the end goal here? What are we trying to achieve? Rather than, you know, I think this, and this needs to change. So I think that was something that flipped for me quite early on, that I was like, you know, I want to come in and do this and change that and do that. But that's not necessarily what this role is about. Yeah. It's about starting conversations if they aren't already being had before, or making sure that these conversations are progressing at the speed at which you deem necessary. Because at the end of the day, you are the one that represents students, and if you do the job well, you will be someone who is able to do that. So I think that was, you know, a caveat that I think you got as well, that, you know, this is different than the AMS, this is different than the SGPS, but the impact doesn't have to be any less great. So I maybe I'll leave it at that. I don't know if we want to open it up to questions, or if we wanted to chat a little more just about, you know, our 2 years in the term. Caller, you let me know, how are we doing for time? Maybe just if people have questions also, we're just happy to answer them.
Yeah, you guys are welcome to have as much time as you like. Definitely, if you want to start with questions, go for it. And then maybe if people are a little bit hesitant to ask, you guys can chat more about your time, if that works for you.
Sure. Okay. Why don't we open up for questions then? If anyone has any, and if not, we can keep chatting, and perhaps the questions will roll in. Or just like see all your faces. Yeah, awesome. I'm staring at just names. Hello.
Well, first of all, thanks to Owen and Cam for the story. It really gives us a great insight as to kind of the process of rectorship. The first immediate question that I had when I heard about the position of rector was actually, is it significantly more advantageous for people who are more involved within the AMS executive committee and all that, and people who have better connections and more experience within the governing student bodies? Because, for example, like I really never heard of a rector. When I talk to my friends about it, even friends who you know, who are in ComSoc, who are in like AMS executive positions, and they're like, I've heard of it, but I really don't know what the position entails. And for me, like, I don't have as much experience with kind of anything to do with the governing student bodies, other than the fact that I'm in a club. But so then I don't have the next necessary guidance and people to consult and all that stuff, whereas someone who is more in tune with that area would. So would you say that that poses a disadvantage?
Absolutely not. I think, as with anything, you know, the more people you know, the more people that, you know, that could possibly help you out with a campaign. Yeah, sure. But that doesn't necessarily come from, you know, sitting, you know, at X level of the AMS, or, you know, being in X number of clubs. I actually think that sometimes being uber involved in, you know, what's going on sometimes poses a disadvantage, because, you know, you're so in the issues sometimes that it's hard to kind of zoom out and say, okay, you know, what am I actually doing here? Like, why am I doing this? So I would say absolutely no, it does not pose a disadvantage. I think you'll have the fact that you've already recognized that this is possibly, you don't know as much about the governing structure of the university, or, you know, you might not know how assembly works, and, you know, the powers of assembly and how that works with, you know, the SGPS or the AMS or the different faculty societies. But this is all stuff that we've all had to learn. Like, no one comes in knowing all of this stuff. And I can say, you know, I was never involved with AMS before running for rector. I was involved with ASIS, but like with professional development. and the Queen Student Alumni Association. So like I was involved, but never at the level where I would have been like, yes, the next like logical step here is to be rector. So I would say no, and possibly even poses an advantage if you recognize what those steps need to be to make sure that you are confident in kind of how these things work and how these mechanisms interact with each other. Cam?
No, I think that's perfectly put. And to be candid with you, I never was involved with the AMS. I was only involved with RedSoc, but a lot of that was being a Don and just being a residence facilitator. So a lot of it was mostly just conversations that I was having on the campaign trail. Really just trying to even chat with as many people as possible while I was on campus. I remember, I don't know if they still permit this, but before every single class would start, we would literally sprint, or I would literally sprint from classroom to classroom to try and give my 45-second, stump speech, just to tell people, hey, this is who I am, this is what I'm running on. And this is why you should vote for me, or I hope that you would vote for me. And so really a lot of it is just trying to get your name out there, the name recognition, and just, trying to get your friends to talk about it as well too. So it's I think Owen puts it correctly though. You don't have to be within the know-it-all. You don't have to be within the establishment or what have you. It's really just, if you want it, go for it. Because at the end of the day, if you really want to be able to make a difference, there's no better opportunity.
That's awesome. Thank you. And if no one else has a question, I had a follow-up question to that. I'll just wait to see if anyone.
There's a question in the chat. I think Simranjeet's mic isn't working. Owen and Cam, do you want me to read you the question? And then Jason, we can circle back to you.
No problem.
Okay.
Yes, we don't have a chat up, so yes, reading would be helpful.
Okay, I'll read it out to you. The question is, as rector, how was your experience with narrowing down on issues you would want to focus on before others?
Ooh, okay. Narrowing down on, so like, I guess that's a hard one. I think it's a combination of both your own perspective and speaking to others, as I said before. So you have to have a platform, which I love and hate at the same time, because I think it allows you to convey what you want to convey to the student body, and in no uncertain terms, basically narrow down what your priorities are, which I think are good, but often can be overly prescriptive because things change. And 2 years is actually a long time on campus. And I can say that my first year and my second year in the role has been very different. So I think it's a combination of going out and talking to students while not like campaigning, but just like seeing, what do you think Queens could do better? What do you think Queens isn't doing well right now? I very quickly picked up on housing as one of the big issues kind of that were affecting all students. And that was something that drove me in my decision making for how to actually narrow these things down, because as rector, you represent all students. And that's a big job, and it's difficult because yes, there are issues within faculties. Yes, there are issues within programs, possibly, some issues with residents or, with, graduate student funding packages or, whatever it may be. But what are these like really big issues that touch almost every single Queen student? And I could see that when I was campaigning and when I was talking to students before, is like, you bring up housing and every single student will have some sort of either landlord horror story or housing search horror story or something. So that kind of clicked to me like, okay, so not only is it really important to students, it's something that I can connect with, the broadest range of students, because at the end of the day, you're trying to get their votes, right? So that was kind of something that clicked for me is, what are these issues that, impact as many students as possible and what can be done about it. it's a really tough issue and not one that, you know, action can be taken on really quickly. You see, you know, the Ontarian federal government's having issues with this as well. But I think that was kind of something that helped me in the process.
Yeah, I think that that's actually a really good way of putting it too, which is things are going to change. Even with the best laid plans, things aren't always going to be consistent, but having a, you know, a vision, at least trying to sell a vision that you have going in certainly is good. And trying to narrow it down, the way that I did it was really the process was sitting around the table with my team. So I had a campaign manager as well as a deputy campaign manager, and then a few you know, policy advisors that really helped me to be able to say, okay, this is what we wanted to focus on. But I already brought in a lot of what I wanted to achieve because of my experience through Resident Society. You know, a lot of it was the fact that, again, we wanted to be able to touch on mental health as the overarching issue across campus, because this was something that was, you know, was an issue and still is to this day for a lot of youth and for students. But within that, there was really a couple main streams, that being, you know, sexual violence, drinking culture, access to mental health. During my first years of rectorship, like, you know, first few months, there was a, you know, an exciting party that took place that was caught up in the Globe and Mail, and you know, had to end up dealing with that, you know, the racist costume party. And so diversity and inclusion was then added in as another element, because I think to what Owen said, you know, the rector is one of those positions that is perfectly situated between the AMS and the SGPS. At times I see it, or throughout my rectorship, I saw it as really one of those voices that sets the values for the student body. It sets the vision, it sets the values and what we want to be at the end of the day. You know, the motto of the office is Princeps Servesque S. My Latin is horrible.
Better than mine.
But all this to say, what that translates to is be a servant and a leader. And really at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to be. So although you'll have the, you know, you can have the perfect platform, it's not always going to remain the same. I think Owen's identification though of the issues throughout the campaign, you know, housing was also something that was brought up during my time. It wasn't the prominent issue amongst students, but it certainly was something that was bubbling and beginning to become a little bit more of a topic. Certainly now, I think it's more prevalent than it was during my time at Queen's. But all this to say, you will be able to hear what's happening, and you will be able to see and identify what some of the common threads are. And I think just trying your best to be able to just bring forward what you think is going to be best for the university, and be that voice, be that leader, be that servant for the institution. I think that that's really something that's going to be crucial.
Jason, did you or Sumaji, I don't know if you had a follow-up to that. Hopefully we answered that question for you. Yes, amazing, okay.
Jason,
Was
did you
there
have your second
yeah.
question?
Yeah, sorry, I'll try and keep it concise, but in the beginning I talked about how I didn't really know about the position, and a lot of my friends really didn't know about the position, and that's actually finding out about the rectorship was kind of what like led to me coming to this info session, because it I think this is like the culmination of what I've been feeling for the past 3 years of university, which is like I have a really lacking sense of belonging. I think Queen's has done a very, very good job in working towards this inclusivity, and obviously there's always room for improvement, but we've been so heavily focused on that we haven't been focusing on the good, and haven't been giving students a chance to feel like they're a proud Queen's student. Like I talked to a lot of my friends and they're like, yeah, like, you know, I go to Queen's, I like the environment, we have the lake, it's nice, but you know, I don't like the people here, I don't really like this and that. And it's like, well, I don't think that we emphasize enough that we should be proud to go to a prestigious university. And I guess my question is then, in some of the responsibilities and roles that you guys have had in your tenure, what kind of power do you hold over those kind of decisions? And where do you see yourself making these strategic decisions in an assembly, or I don't really know how it works, but within everyone, I guess.
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I think a great place to start thinking about the experiences that people have at Queen's, because I mean, everyone at some point in their Queen's career is going to feel like they don't fit in, no matter what they look like, no matter how they act. That it's difficult, like moving away from home, moving away from your friends, family, support system, whatever it may be, to, you know, a university that has a very strong reputation of being, you know, where rich white kids from Toronto go. And so I think that's absolutely a battle that needs to be fought. But I completely agree that I think we are a community. It doesn't matter what we look like. It doesn't matter where we're from. It doesn't matter, you know, what your background is. And early on in my tenure, I had a conversation with someone at the university and they asked me a question. They said, you know, what is Queen's, and how would you describe, like, what are you? What is a Queen's student? And you know, at Western they're Mustangs. At, you know, other places they're, you know, whatever. If I asked that question to you, you probably wouldn't say you're a Gale. Maybe if you played on the sports team, you say you're a Gale. But there's no like common thread of like what are we? There's no common unifier, and that's just kind of an obscure example. Like, I'm not looking for everyone to be like, oh, I'm a Gale now, awesome, like we're one big community. But I think it gets at this underlying thread of like, you know, as I said before, like, what are we all doing here? Well, we have a common purpose. I think there's a lot of you know, we're all on the same page about, you know, we're trying to get a piece of paper at the end of the year, or at the end of your 4 or 5 years, whatever it may be, and trying to learn and meet people along the way, whatever, you know, your goals are after. I think that it's really important to remember that we're all Queen's students and we're all going through the same things at the same time. Well, yes, some people may experience you know, different things, different experiences. There's so much importance in that. And it's not a simple issue. There is no motion at assembly that you can pass. But I think those are exactly the conversations that you need to be having with the AMS and the SGPS and student affairs and, you know, all of the different people that work on these things. And one of the unique things about being rector is you have 2 years. So you can help incoming executive faculty societies plan their priorities for the year, and you can talk about inclusion. And you can kind of get everyone on the same page, like, you know, what do we think would help the most? And you know, they have resources and are having conversations with students that you might not be able to be having, and vice versa. So I think it's important to kind of, I don't want to call them like backroom conversations, but like these are conversations that you have over lunch, you know, with the AMS president, or you know, over lunch with someone else. I think is important, but there's no kind of like policy or procedure mechanism necessarily.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers that. Cam, if you have any.
Yeah. I think one of the other things too there is, you know, again, it goes back to, you are the voice of the university, you are the voice of the institution. I think having those conversations with student bodies and student leadership is always effective. You know, I think you always win over more friends or more flies with honey rather than vinegar, right? I think that's the biggest thing. The other key piece to it too is when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So within my year of focusing on, you know, rectorship, obviously with the Racist Party, what was established was a principals advisory body that allowed that focused on diversity and inclusion, and a report was provided to Principal Wolf at the time on a number of ways in which the university can improve on diversity and inclusion. Within that frame, you know, I was able to serve as a special advisor and be able to be brought in for consultations. But then also on the board of trustees, that I think is an underrated piece where, you know, you really get a special opportunity that really very few students get to be able to influence where the university is going and speak to some of the issues. You know, Board of Trustees meets 4 times a year, and during that time, the rector always has to provide an update alongside the AMS president and the SGPS president as to what's happening. AMS will typically focus on, you know, what's happening with the students' institutions, and what will be, you know, kind of issues there. SGPS will also focus on their own for graduate students, and they'll be able to provide an update. But you, as the voice of the university and the voice of the student body, literally speak to the people who are governing and making decisions as to the financial position of the university and where that money is being put and what direction the university is going in, and really being able to influence and again speak to some of those board of trustee members is so vital. And being able to sit on each and every single committee, it's exhausting work, but it's so vital to be able to provide that voice of what the students need. During our time there, one of the key things that I really pushed for was, well, the fact that we even had a racist party led to the questions of, well, what's the education on campus around, you know, what does diversity and inclusion mean? But further to that, well, what spaces do we have that allow for students to go and feel like they're a part of a community at the end of the day? What physical spaces do we build? And so really 2 things came out of that. We really wanted to push for a physical space, and I spoke to Board of Trustee members multiple times, who then spoke to administration saying that, hey, it would be great if we can start finding a physical space on campus that we may be able to utilize, and kind of at the end of the day, push it as a big W for our university because we were getting our butt kicked a little bit. But the second thing to that too was that, you know, it really kind of goes back to that voice of the institution. The second piece to it was the Indigenous piece. And the fact that we, you know, had the law school named Sir John A. Macdonald Hall, which was after obviously the founding father of our country. But you know, there were associated issues there with regards to the residential schools and the creation of those residential schools within his government or time in government as Prime Minister. So what could we do to be able to create a space where students, and especially Indigenous students attending law school, feel more safe and secure? Well, why not build art pieces, art installations right in the middle, in the heart of the main foyer of the law school, so that as soon as you walk in, you understand that although you are going to law school at Queen's, it is a school that is focused on ensuring that we have nation-to-nation building with Indigenous peoples across Canada. What's a better thing than to see those peace treaties that we have through wampum belts in the first time. So a lot of that is where we are trying to build those conversations, being that voice, being willing to stand up and say some of the hard things, and even speak to some of the difficulties that students are facing. Because a lot of times, many of those board members, they don't really know what's going on with the students. But unless you're willing to have those conversations and be frank and be upfront and say, this is what's happening, and this is how I can utilize your help, or this is where your voice matters, that's the power that you have. And no other institution allows that power. That's the uniqueness of that position. Within the same frame though, I think a lot of times we also speak to what the undergraduate students need. I think the graduate student body is also one that at times, you know, and even during my time, I recognize this was a failing that or not a failing, but an oversight at times, just given the complex issues that undergraduate students, but graduate students still face a lot of issues, you know, research, feeling included as well, being able to have a good supervisor-supervisee relationship. Those are issues. And so during my time, we also tried to talk about, well, what funding do we have to be able to ensure that we're building positive relationships, to ensure that graduate students also feel included with their labs, with their research fields, with their fellow students. And those are conversations that I'm not sure have finished. I don't think they're ever going to be finished, but certainly those are ones that I would encourage any potential candidates to think through as well.
Yeah, that answers a lot. I really appreciate that. I think I have a bit of a skewed point of view because I also came into Queens at the peak of COVID. It was 2020. So I didn't have an orientation. I didn't even know what AMS was. I only know that I went to Queens, and I talked to like a lot of friends who went to Queens and some older students who already graduated like 10 years before I went to Queens. They're like, yeah, you will see this like awesome, like, community of people who are proud to be Gaelic, and we have these chants and all this stuff and all these traditions, and I didn't see a single ounce of that. And so that's kind of when I came about. Not not to take up too much of your time, I just have one more very quick question just on like practical eligibility, because I'm fourth year right now, but the tenure is 2 years. So let's say all the process goes well, and someone like me who's a fourth year becomes the rector. Would that person have to stay for 2 years as a student throughout the whole thing? So I would have to have a full course load and stuff like that.
Not full course load. You need to, I believe, and possibly fact check me on this, but you just need to be an active student. It doesn't matter full-time or part-time. I was a part-time student for last year. I would not suggest taking a full course load. Doing this position. It's
a lot of work.
It can be at times. It ebbs and flows, absolutely, but no, I think it's actually better suited for an upper year who is able to either split up their last year of school into two, or I mean, if there's a certificate or something that you're interested in completing over the next 2 years, you could kind of like dabble in that here and there. But I think it's really just need to be an active student and have paid your AMS SGPS membership fees.
That's correct. Yeah. So I believe that the minimum credit is that you need to have 6 credits per semester while you're running. So I think that's 2 courses per semester, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's the minimum. I don't know if that's still the case. At least I was for my time. So being a part-time student and an active student, paying your fees is certainly something that you also need to do as well. All this to say though, I would reiterate Owen's recommendation. Do not go for full-time studies because it is a bit of a more demanding position at times. But all this to say, yes, yeah, you can definitely. I was a 4th year student when I first ran for the rectorship. And I stayed for an extra 2 years serving in the position while also extending my studies. And it was a really great opportunity to be able to take on extra courses. How well I did in those courses, that's what I call into question sometimes. But at the same time, it allowed me to be able to take on others that I don't think I would have had while I was, if I was to do a regular undergraduate degree.
Right. So you would definitely say it was worth the 2 extra years?
I'd say so. It was certainly it was an exciting role for sure, and one where I think you want to be able to make sure that you're just planning out your eventual exit from Queens, because unless you want to stay there forever, but it's certainly I don't think that that's ever a bad thing either, because it is a great university as well. But certainly it was a really great opportunity to be able to make a big difference, but also stay here and get some extra credits then.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you. Is there any way I can reach you two? I'm not sure if it was on the slides, but like you two are the only people that I have currently known that knows anything about rectorship. So
yes, feel free to send me an email at rector@queensu.ca. I think it's probably in the slide deck somewhere.
That makes it easy, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe
I can provide it to you.
Yeah, and then maybe I can give that to Calder and she can make sure it gets sent over your way.
Awesome, thank you, appreciate it.
Of course. Any other questions? Maybe we'll wrap up here in a second, but.
Okay, not seeing anything in the chat. So if you guys have any final remarks, go for it. Otherwise, I can say a little sentence or two and then we can call it a night.
Sure. I think the last thing I'll say, is you've probably recognized that there are some similar features between Cam and I's experience in being rector, but also difference. And the thing I'll say is that you're really able to bring what you want to the role. And that's the exciting part of this, to be honest with you, is, you know, you can really make it what you want it to be. So I'll probably leave it at that, because it's really up to the person who's in the role to dictate what it looks like, which can be difficult at times. But that's why, you know, I've come to rely on Cam for many things. You know, I'll give him a shout sometimes when I'm like, hey, did you do this? Did you encounter this? You know, what were the roadblocks here? And he is able to provide his perspective. You know, whether I take it or not is up to me. But it's really good to have that perspective as you kind of you know, are interested in the role, or even hearing, you know, us talk about it. If you're like, well, I wouldn't have done that, you don't have to. That's the amazing part about it, is it's really yours for the taking. So that's probably what I'll leave with.
Yeah, I think that's, I have nothing else to add. That's exceptional.
Okay, perfect. Oh, and I just threw yours and my email in the chat. And then Cam, once I get your information, I'll pass that around too, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming, everyone. And especially Owen and Cam, that was a huge help. It was wonderful to hear you guys speak. And if anyone thinks of anything after the fact, please don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to help you. Otherwise, best of luck to everyone running.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Good
Take
night,
care.
guys.
Bye-bye.